Hey y'all, my name is Yvette and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about why I'm getting into horror books and how I'm going about doing that. But before I get into the video, this is the first video I've filmed since George Floyd was killed and the world protested against police brutality and anti-black racism. There's usually a sizable time gap between when I film my videos and when they actually go up, but whether it is 2 days from now, 2 weeks, or 2 months, there is still work to be done. There are still petitions to sign and organizations to donate to and protests still going on, so whatever your role is in the Black Lives Matter movement and whenever this video goes up, we still need to show up. So I'll be leaving some relevant links down in the description. And on BookTube, I think that the bare minimum non-black folks need to be doing right now is to be listening to black booktubers when they talk about racism, both in the community and in the world at large. I've also seen a couple videos from non-black booktubers on this subject and on allyship, and all I have to say about that is that if you are centering yourself in the discussion and not prioritizing the voices of black booktubers, then you're doing it wrong. So I'll leave some links to black booktubers talking about this in the description below. And now onto the video. This has been something that has been in the making for a few months now, so I'm excited to finally talk about it. This video is going to be in 2 parts. The first part is going to be a chatty get ready with me while I'm going to be putting on my makeup and talking about how and why I'm getting into horror. And then in the second part of the video, it's going to be a book haul of all the things I've hauled based on what I talk about in the first half of the video. And if you're just here to see the books I'm hauling, I'll leave a timestamp so you can jump to that part. So to start this off, I have to say that I am a giant baby when it comes to anything scary. Like, I have gotten nightmares from just the trailers of scary movies, and if I have to watch a scary movie, I make sure to Wikipedia the plot beforehand so I can go into it prepared. I don't like being scared, and I've said on this channel multiple times how I don't like thrillers because why would I spend my free time deliberately making myself anxious? But in these past couple of years, I've started to read outside of my comfort zone, and I've started to read some tropes that I had previously sworn off. Like, when I first started BookTube, I hated age gap romances and romances between employees and their bosses, but then I read Idlewild by Jude Sierra and I ended up really liking it. And that's an romance by a queer Latinx author. And that got me thinking that, well, maybe it's not that I don't like these tropes, maybe it's just that I haven't read them when they're done well. And also, maybe not only do I like them when they're done well, but when they're done well by people of color and or queer folks. I've come to the conclusion since then that I am much more interested in books when they are by queer people or people of color, and if that's true for romance and tropes I didn't think I liked, then that could also be true for horror as well. And I'm not completely new to horror. There are a couple of audio drama podcasts that I really like, and I actually did a video of those when I first started my channel, but for some reason it's a lot harder for me to get into horror books. There have been a few that I've randomly picked up and liked, like the Small Spaces series by Catherine Arden and The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, and I read a couple of Grady Hendrix books, but I wanted to give the genre a good honest try in a way that was intentional. And I started wanting to do that after I listened to 2 horror type podcasts. I had intended this eyeshadow to be a little bit more orangey and like poppy with the color of my shirt, but it's not really showing up, and I'm realizing now that it's because I completely forgot to put on any kind of primer. So I'm going to switch up palettes and hope that this other one works better. The first of those podcasts is one called Monstras, and this is a monthly nonfiction podcast about different monsters and folklore from Latin America, and they often focus on how colonialism and how the intermingling of indigenous African and European cultures have birthed these monsters. Well, I said I wanted orange. This is definitely orange. Maybe too much orange. I like this podcast because it helped me restructure the way I think about horror, because horror, it isn't about just scaring you. It can be a deep dive into culture and analyzing that culture to discuss what scares a specific group of people and why. I feel like that's something I've always known because, like, duh, that doesn't take a genius to figure out, but it never really clicked for me. And I think part of that is because I am such a big scaredy cat, but also I think part of that is that all the horror, or not all, but like at least most of the horror media I've consumed has been from a white perspective. And what that comes down to is that what white people fear isn't the same thing as what people of color and queer folks fear. Sometimes what white people fear is the other, and sometimes that other is people of color and queer people. So it makes sense that that kind of horror never really clicked with me. I've been listening to that podcast for a while now, but one that I more recently picked up is one called Scream Queen, and I mostly started listening to that one because one of the hosts is Tommy Pico, who is a queer indigenous poet I really like. The other host of the show is a black woman who, for some reason, I can't remember her name right now, but I'll make sure to put it on the screen. But the sort of tagline of this podcast is that this is a podcast about horror movies by people who aren't usually depicted in horror movies. They discuss a range of both new and old horror movies, always making sure to include their unique perspective on the representation or lack thereof in the horror movies. These two hosts are so funny together, and hearing them just talk and laugh and have a good time talking about horror helped me demystify the genre. I've always viewed horror as this big scary monster that is not for me, and maybe it isn't, but this podcast made me realize that it can be. There is horror out there that I'll be able to see myself in. I just have to seek it out. So I've reached the point in my character development where I don't immediately write off horror. So over the last 3 months or so, I've collected around 15 books to talk about today. That is quite a few books, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with them, so bear with me while I get through all of these books. I'm not done with my makeup, but I'm almost finished with it, so I'm going to go ahead and finish it off camera, then come back, because I do not want to try to struggle doing it at the same time as I hold up a book. So starting this book haul off strong, the first 2 books, I'm not sure that they count because they're non-fiction, but like horror adjacent, but I don't really care, I'm counting them anyways. The first book I got is Race, Oppression, and the Zombie: Essays on Cross-Cultural Appropriations of the Caribbean Tradition and Contributions to Zombie Studies by Christopher Moreman and Cory Rushton. I heard about this on the zombie episode of Monstras, and before that, I did not know that the origin of the zombie actually came from the Caribbean, and it was a very specific response to colonialism and slavery, and that is what this book is about. I really like zombie stuff, and finding that out was kind of shocking to me because there is so much mainstream zombie content out there, from The Walking Dead to The Train to Busan, and nothing I've seen or read has reflected the actual origin of the zombies. And I really want to know more about this thing that I enjoy. And this book looks a bit more academic than I was expecting, but that explains the price I paid for it because this was not cheap. The next book I got is Darkly: Black History and America's Gothic Soul by Leila Taylor. This is part memoir and part cultural critique on the Gothicness of American culture as a result of slavery and how that relates to race today. The description of this book immediately reminds me of Get Out and Jordan Peele, which is the only horror movie I've seen in years. And the only reason why I watched that movie is because I knew it was going to explore race in America in a really brilliant way. I'm thinking that this book is going to be an exploration of a lot of similar themes that were behind that movie, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. The next book I got is Carmilla, the iconic sapphic vampire book. I had to get this book. I have watched the modernized web series version of this book, and I've listened to an audio drama version of this book, so now I want to actually read it. This is about a girl who's isolated in a European castle, and she gets a companion named Carmilla who ends up being a vampire and tries to seduce her. When I was getting this book, I made sure to get this edition because it's edited by Carmen Maria Machado, who is a queer Latinx author, and her most recent book was a memoir about queer sapphic relationships, and I'm really looking forward to her introduction and her notes in this. The next book I got is Taaqtumi, an anthology of Arctic horror stories, and this is an anthology of horror stories from Indigenous Canadian authors about how dangerous the dark can be. And the setting for these stories seem to be that freezing tundra, gotta survive the cold kind of setting. That kind of setting is really not my kind of setting, but I really want to give this a try because it's a horror anthology from Indigenous authors. The next book I don't have yet because it's not out yet, but I pre-ordered it and I'll be getting it soon, and that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia-Moreno-Garcia. This is going to be a reimagining of the classic Gothic suspense novel, and it's going to take place in an isolated mansion in 1950s Mexico. The main character is a socialite who goes to this mansion after a friend writes to her and begs her to go there and save her. The cover of this book is one of the prettiest I've seen for 2020 releases, and I've heard a lot of good things about it. These next round of books are going to be ebooks I got from Story Bundle, and I'm not like sponsored by Story Bundle or anything, I just really like them. about at least once a month they put together a group of 10 or so books that fall under the same genre or theme, and then you can buy them together on ebook for cheap. So like they've had a steampunk bundle and an Afrofuturism bundle and a queer sci-fi bundle, just tons of good stuff. And the ones I'm talking about today came from a Latinx dark fiction bundle, and I went through all of those and I checked on Goodreads, and anything that was tagged as horror I'm talking about today. The first of those books is The Bloody Poetry by Leland, Pitts-Gonzalez, and the Goodreads summary is very vague about what this book is about. I think it's about a husband whose wife has gone missing, and he's keeping the reason why she's gone missing from their daughter to protect her, or something like that. The next book is Island Bones by Gaby Triana, and this is about a woman named Ellie who goes back to her family home on an island to spread her grandmother's ashes. She discovers that this place is haunted and some old family secrets are coming back to bite her, and also there's a hurricane approaching the island. Next up is Zero Saints by Gabino Iglesias, and I believe this one takes place in Puerto Rico. The main character is a drug dealer who has to watch helplessly as a new gang comes in and takes over his territory and brutally kills his best friend in front of him. The leader of this new gang seems to be something more than human, so the main character takes up Santeria to use against him. The next book is Shapeshifter by Gf Gonzales, and this is about a werewolf who has managed to control his inner beast and keep it a secret, but then this rich man comes into his life and starts blackmailing him to kill for him, else he tell everyone that the main character is a werewolf. The next book is Santa Muerte by Cynthia Pelayo, and this is about a high school student named Ariana who lives in Chicago. Her dad is an investigator that's looking into a Mexican cartel, and he's involved in an accident, and after that she starts having dreams of this shadowy figure visiting her and asking for her dad. She soon becomes a target for some gangs and their black magic cult. The next book I got as a part of this bundle is Coney Island Siren by Theresa Varela, and this is about a woman named Maggie who goes to a flea market and she picks up the diary of an 18th century woman, and as she starts to read this diary she realizes that this one's life and her life parallel each other in a really scarily accurate way, and I'm assuming that things take off from there. And finally, the last book I got as a part of this bundle is Snow Over Utopia by Rudolfo A. Serna, and this book is a quote genre-bending short novel of apocalyptic fantasy, sci-fi, psychedelia, and doom metal. The summary of this book is a hot mess beyond that, but from what I understand, it's about this girl in a post-apocalyptic world. She gets her eyes stolen, and then she goes on the run with a murderer, and she tries to get her eyes back with the help of a living computer called the Witch Mother. And now getting to the last batch of books I'm talking about today, I have 3 that are all published under the Nightmare magazine. Basically, these are collections of short stories, poetry, art, nonfiction pieces, and author spotlights from people we don't usually see in horror. On the website, they say that these special issues exist to relieve a brokenness in a genre that has been enabled time and time again by favoring certain voices and portrayals of particular characters. The first of these is issue 49, and it's under the title People of Color Destroy Horror, and it's edited by Silvia-Moreno Garcia. So this is a collection of horror pieces by people of color, and I'm especially excited for this because it's edited by Silvia-Moreno Garcia, and she's just one of those authors who owns my wallet. But more than that, I looked on the inside and they list some of the other editors, and one of them is Tananarive, who I've been really wanting to read, so doubly excited for this. The next one is going to be issue 25 under the title Women Destroy Horror. This is edited by Ellen Datlow, and the cover of this book is absolutely stunning. I recently discovered a love for body horror with Wilder Girls by Word Power, and with this kind of cover there better be some body horror in this. And finally, the last book of this haul is issue 37 under the title Queers Destroy Horror, edited by Wendy N. Wagner. And I flipped through this book. I don't recognize any of the authors included, so I'm hoping to find some new loves. So that is going to wrap up my thoughts on getting into horror and the books I got for that. And I also have my eye on a few other authors like Tananarive and Victor LaBelle, Clive Barker, Stephen Graham Jones, and I actually do have a few of their books on my Kindle. They've been sitting on my digital shelves forever, so between those books and everything I've hauled today, I feel like I have a pretty solid start on where I want to start horror. If you have any horror recommendations for books that aren't by straight white people, please let me know in the comments below, and also wish me luck on getting through all of these books. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.